Hi. Um, Today I thought I could talk about, I'm going to talk about frequency. And it's something I've been talking about a fair amount recently, but I'll hopefully hit it from a little bit of a different angle. Um, and the thing that inspired this talk is I was listening to a podcast last night, and a lot of spiritual teachers we'll talk about that your internal creates the external, which there is truth in that. Your internal state, right, defines kind of how you're showing up in moments in the external, which then will determine the words you're saying. It will determine, right, how calm and peaceful you are or how reactive you are, which will then influence how people are relating to you. And it does have a big impact in what you're creating in your life. But I think the thing that often gets missed and that we can have a tendency to over focus on in spirituality, and for me, I did this for a long time, which is why I have brought it up a couple of times, is it's something, I'm trying to help other people not go through what I went through, where we become obsessed with frequency and over focus on frequency, and then wonder why the things we were hoping to create in our life aren't showing up. And for me, like, for a while, I, like a good solid year or two, I would listen to like people, either I would do visualizations or listen to people that channeled, probably like for 3 to 6 hours a day. I mean, there was a period where I was kind of living with my parents. I didn't have a job at the time, and so there was just a lot of space in my life. And I filled that with what I was really passionate about, which was spirituality. But there's a certain point of focusing on frequency and focusing on your internal state where it actually becomes not helpful, and where you actually start to overdo it. And the thing about visualizations, the thing about doing a spiritual practice or harmonizing yourself to spiritual energy, is it's essentially bringing more heavenly energy to your earthly body. And that makes you feel more peace and calm. But also, our body is, we are living on a planet that is remembering its heavenly nature, but we're still acclimating to higher frequency energy. And so when you are over focused on visualization, when you're over focused on meditation, when you're over focused on even things like prayer, it actually activates your nervous system to a little bit. And a lot of times when people teach visualizations, they'll call it an activation. And if we're doing too many activations, and anytime you are connecting with an angel, anytime you are connecting with a spirit guide, even if it was just asking for them help, or through prayer, or through some type of visualization, it is their consciousness is higher than yours, and so it is activating your nervous system to a place. It's like almost like you are working on anchoring a higher frequency, almost like a workout. And just like building bigger muscles, right, it takes time for you to be able to go squat 200 pounds in the gym. Usually people aren't able to do that right off the bat unless they're already very active. And so thinking about, when I'm connecting to my guides, I need to give a digestion period. I need to give my body time to receive it, because if I'm only focusing on connecting to higher frequencies of consciousness and overdoing that, I'm going to actually activate my nervous system a little too much, and it will lead me to actually being more reactive and impulsive in my life, because it's almost like an imbalance of the divine feminine and masculine, where I'm being too intentional, and I'm harmonizing myself to too much harmony, and I'm not giving myself time to then digest it and also express express my feelings in a healthy way. And so when we're too focused on spirituality and not focused enough on creating or creating art or taking action steps in our life, where it's almost like you're focused too much on the divine feminine, and what you'll experience when you are too focused on spiritual practice is a lot of spaciousness in your life because you're not creating anything. And we our mastery is balance, and what you want to do is you want to take the time I take to go within then becomes intentional action when I'm no longer within but I'm experiencing the world. And so being mindful of, just like I do a workout, I have to give my body time to receive the greater harmony I'm bringing to it. And if I'm just pounding channeled message after channeled message or visualization after visualization, or even if I'm meditating for like more than, I really try and live by an hour tops at most for a practice. I also have injuries. And so the caveat I'm starting to find is like if we're going for something like tissue repair or like healing our body, then going over an hour is okay, but you have to recognize I'm going to be a little ungrounded and I'll probably have a little bit harder time being present and taking direct action in my life because when we're over focused on heavenly energy, it actually brings us out of our body a little bit. And if we do that, like let's say we do visualizations, which is something I've done for like 3 hours straight. You can do that and you'll feel really peaceful and you'll feel blissed out of your skull, but you also won't be able to focus really on anything in your life typically, and you'll be a little scattered and fluttery, and probably even if you were like connecting with friends, you'd probably be a little oversensitive and flaky because you're not really grounded into earth. It's like too much heaven and not enough earth. And so it's really important to find balance, and it's really important. Yes, your internal state does create, does help you, does affect the external, but the fastest way to actually manifest your life, or the fastest way to actually be really peaceful on the inside and then also have a beautiful life to go explore on the outside, is to take the intention. I'm mindful and intentional going within, but then I use that going within to inspire direct and intentional action in my life. And if we're only going within, if we're only focused on spiritual practice and never focusing on expression or taking action in our life, we're going to just find that our life always feels like winter. And even something of like, oh, maybe I don't have good friends in my life because I haven't worked enough on my internal state. But what you start to realize as someone who like lived in working on my internal state for a year, after for a couple of years, is that people aren't going to be your friend if you don't ask them to be your friend. It's kind of like your apartment's never going to get clean if you don't actually go and clean it. Like it doesn't matter how many visualizations you do, you actually have to go and then clean your apartment for it to be clean. And the same with finding new friends. It's like, oh, I'm never going to find new friends through meditation and spiritual practice if I'm not going to new community events and being curious with people and interacting with others, and asking them, hey, would you want to be my friend? Would you want to go get coffee or go for a walk or go to this concert that another friend of mine is playing? And recognizing whatever you are trying to create in your life, you have to work at it. It doesn't matter how spiritual you are. And the act of expressing yourself and the act of taking action is balancing out the divine feminine with the divine masculine. And you'll start to find, wow, I feel good on the inside, and the outside life I'm living is also very fulfilling. And we can sometimes, when we're avoiding responsibility for the life we've created, we can focus too much on the internal, but it becomes avoidance rather than helpful. And anytime you're relating to life from avoidance, it's unconscious, and it will cause you, and it will cause more, it will cause, more harm in your life than good, if and unless you, like, if you were to meditate for 30 minutes a day and then use that peace you found in your life to be more calm and relaxed in the people you're connecting with, and also to be more intentional about how you spent your day, right? That would be a beautiful balanced expression of, I'm taking time to cultivate harmony, and then I'm sharing it with others, and I'm sharing beauty, and I'm it's more meaningful, right, to be able to share the beauty we've cultivated with others than to just hoard it for ourselves, and go, no one can meet me, no one can meet me, because you're not sharing yourself enough. And when you, and you will find, if when you over focus on spirituality, you are going to be more reactive and impulsive, because you're avoiding taking action in your life, and you're also not expressing your feelings enough in some type of art. And art can literally be, right, art can actually be just expression in itself, like, oh, I made myself tea, and I swirled the honey in the tea kind of uniquely, and maybe I put a couple flower petals in the tea, right? That's beautiful, that's art. And it doesn't, and it's good to, like, have some type of of art we can be devoted to, even if it's just a hobby. But we also can live our life in an artistic way, and express how we can express our art, even in something as simple as walking, where we walk in a unique way. Lately, like, when I've been walking, I've been, like, snapping. I've been making little beats as I walk, and it makes it really entertaining to walk, and it also kind of brings me a little bit more into the moment, and it's helpful, for me, after I've done, like, something like as a meditation, as a way of kind of me bringing me back into the moment I'm in. Because when you're connecting to spirit, it's pulling you a little bit out of the material and more into the spirit world, and we want to make sure that we're finding balance, so that way we have an easy time coming back to our life, and an easy time still being present with people. Because when you're, if you're too much in the spirit, you'll actually find you have a hard time listening and being present in the moment. And so focus on the internal frequency, but just like winter is a couple months, and then it's time for spring again. And it's time and you have to work for spring to happen. Like, in order for beautiful flowers to grow, you have to plant the seeds, you have to, uh, do something to clear all the weeds out where you want to plant those seeds. You have to fertilize the soil, and you have to regularly water those seeds. And so if we wish to experience spring in our life, right, it's not going to happen magically. It's going to happen by you making sure you water those seeds every day, and you are taking the action steps you want to create whatever you're trying to create in your life. And if we've been working at, something like a career for a long time, and it hasn't manifested, right? It's either I'm not sharing it enough with people, I'm not being creative enough in how I market it, or I'm not being consistent enough with what I'm trying to create, for me to actually become skilled enough where people take notice of it. And so it's something to look at. Am I sharing am I, like, only working on it with myself and never sharing it with others, which would actually create opportunities for more people to take interest, or more people to say, oh, like, if you're a musician, like, oh, you should come play at my venue sometime, right? If you never are sharing your art, you're never going to get opportunities like that. And then the second thing is, am I creative enough in how I'm marketing it? Am I taking time am I making sure that I'm putting the stuff I'm creating out on the internet, or just putting it in spaces where people can really see it and appreciate it? And maybe I don't even want to make money from it, but, like, your art is going to be way more fulfilling when people can look at it and say, wow, that's so beautiful, than when you're just looking at it. And for a while, it's nice to create for ourselves, but then eventually our art will have more meaning when we start to share it with others. And then thirdly, consistency is so important, and it's not talked about enough of the more consistent you are, right, the less mistakes you make. And really whatever our art is, if we want it to be more than something than just a hobby, we have to be committed and consistent and work at it daily. And we can look at like a flower and go, wow, that's such a beautiful flower. But even that flower had time where it was growing under the soil and no one saw its beauty. And maybe this flower's seed was buried too deep and it had to spend even more time through the soil than it would have enjoyed, than it found helpful to eventually become that beautiful flower. And we kind of are in a culture where many artists, many people trying to create something different than the status quo, live under this or growing under the soil for longer than they would like, just because our culture and our the society we have, at least in the United States and probably across the world in many cultures, hasn't really found ways to support people who are following different paths than maybe the corporate route or the service industry route. And it can lead us struggling for a while, but you have to recognize, if I get good at something and I really am consistent with it, eventually I'm going to get to a point where people aren't going to be able to turn away, where I'm going to be so good at this, it will captivate them and it will create opportunities. And I just have to make sure I'm sharing it enough and I'm also consistent enough with my practice. Being creative of, if I haven't found success yet, what are ways that would either help put my work more out there, ways that I could hone my skill better. Like maybe I'm an amazing musician but I don't have a good stage presence, or I'm really awkward in between songs, and maybe I work on public speaking or being in front of people, or start doing a little stand-up comedy on the side, just so it's a full service show. And because when we're performing in front of people, people want to feel connected to you, and the music is important, but it's also important of how are you connecting to people in between songs. And there's always ways to grow, and when we are creative and we're expressing creativity regularly, we find those solutions a lot easier. That helps our work grow and helps people be attracted to our work a lot easier when we're embodying creativity regularly through expressing it and balancing it out with our spiritual practice. And I want to there's something I wanted to kind of hit on, that it's something I've experienced with people, with connecting with others. And the thing, I think sometimes people, we can get in a pattern of our in the United States, probably in many places. I think the East, it might be a little different in Asia, but in the United States, people are typically very a little bit more head oriented than heart oriented. And this shows up as I'm connecting to people from their potential. I'm connecting to people from their good qualities, and I'm not really wanting to look at their negative qualities. And typically, people that are relating to others from a place of, this person's amazing, I'm in love with them, they're awesome, and and the things they do that I don't really like, I either ignore, or I try and put in a back corner and not really look at, right? We relate to others like that when that's how we relate to ourselves, which is kind of the thing of your internal creates the external. And I would say a deeper way to teach that would be how you relate to yourself becomes how you relate to others, rather than frequency, because not everyone's spiritual. And also frequency really needs to be balanced out with inspired action. But the truth in relating to yourself is how you relate to yourself becomes how you relate to the world. And so if you don't want to look at your own darkness, or what you do, or how you are still identified with victimhood consciousness, or how you might serve addictions and think that's okay, right? Or use and even that sometimes is like using substances and calling that healthy coping when it really isn't healthy coping. and the ways we don't look at our darkness is then the ways we become attracted to toxicity in our life. And the way we justify that toxicity is we only look at that person's good qualities because we don't look at our darkness. And so then we don't look at other people's darkness. And that, when we do that, is like relating to people from our ideas of them rather than actually getting to know them. And we only don't get to know other people truly and deeply when we haven't taken time to get to know ourselves. And so that what ends up happening is we let people get too close to us who either can't handle it or who don't have the best intentions getting close to us, and they end up hurting us. And then we take that same pattern of relating to people from our ideas, and then we go, oh, that person hurt me, and in order to protect myself from being hurt again, I'm going to take the ideas of how I was only seeing this person's potential, and I'm just going to start projecting ideas on people trying to get to know me as a way of trying to protect myself. And that's how, and we start to form subtle judgments of others while still never getting to know them. And it's something I've experienced connecting with people, of people like me, like reaching out and someone saying, not getting, wanting to get to know me at all, and instantly either setting some type of harsh boundary, or there's just always like, or they're never leaning into greater connection and recognizing, oh, this person has judgments of me and they haven't actually taken the time to get to know me, but they're relating still to people around them from their mind, and they go, my ideas keep me safe, but your ideas, oftentimes your ideas are what actually prevent you from seeing clearly. And it can prevent either you finding more deep and meaningful relationships in your life, and it also prevents you letting people get too close to you who can't actually handle that. And then we keep on getting hurt, and then that actually reinforces our ideas as forms of protection, because you only live in your mind when you don't feel, when there's too much pain in your heart. Ooh, or you don't feel safe being in your heart because of the hurt there. And and recognizing the difference between an insight and a judgment is, insights are accurate, and we only know if our insights are if they're true insights or judgments if we get to know people. And we only don't feel safe getting to know people when we move too quickly with people. And even it's something, a great way to know if someone has a pattern of moving too quickly with people is if you go to a dance event with them, right? Do they tend to move too quickly with people with how they dance with them? And we start to really, a great way to know someone's attachment style is to just dance with them, and you will see it right away. It becomes so obvious. And um and so we have compassion for people, and we don't need to take it personally when someone judges us and doesn't want to get to know us. And it's just like, can we send them healing and go, may this person find greater connection in their life, and may they be able to eventually learn how to let down their guard, even if it isn't going to be with me, because they don't seem to really want to actually take time to get to know me. And so recognizing that, if we move slowly with people and are curious with people, we actually always know who people are. We always know who's going to be right for us, who's going to be able to handle a deeper relationship, and who's going to mishandle that relationship. And I'm a big believer, and it doesn't matter how attracted you are to someone, get to know them as a friend, because a lot of times we put our expectations of, I want a partner, and we throw that at someone, and we try and make them fit into a box without actually seeing if they're partner material. And it's expecting people to be partner material before you've actually explored, can this person actually handle a partnership? And a lot of people start to say this person can handle partnership, right, and are leaning into and having sex with them, and starting to move as if they're in a partnership with that person, even in like a romantic way, even though they haven't actually made sure that that person can actually handle that level of connection and intimacy and attachment with them. And so we're kind of setting ourselves up for failure when we are moving too quickly and not doing our due diligence, kind of like buying a home, right? When you buy a home, you check for gas, you know, you go and expect the house, you make sure there isn't rats or mold, and you make sure that, you know, the home is somewhere you would want to live. And kind of when we're relating to people as friends, we kind of you kind of do the same thing of, okay, how does this person handle basic communication? What is this person's relationships like with their feelings? How do they treat other people? Are they someone that is as devoted to healing and service and helping others as I am? Are they someone that has a really nice presence and are good listeners, or do some of that stuff feel like it doesn't quite line up with where I'm at in my journey? And it becomes really important to be mindful of who are we committing to. And with romantic relationships, the person you should always be most committed to is yourself. And people might think that's selfish, but that's actually the orientation you need to have in order to be able to connect with people from a place of wholeness rather than codependency. And so recognizing when I've really learned to enjoy myself and enjoy my free time, I stop wanting to commit to people who are close but not quite right in a romantic sense. And I start to really enjoy my time alone, because alone is the winter I need to go through in order to be able to handle the spring of receiving a romantic partnership. And if we try and run from the winter we're in, we then end up committing to people who aren't on our level, or who have darkness we really can't stand. And we end up growing something with someone else that's doomed to fall apart because we haven't been intentional enough of resting in winter when winter has come. And so I mean, this brings it back to like commitment, which, you know, when you're with dating, with romantic partners, the you really want to be discerning of, I am committed to making sure that I am intentional about who I let get close to me, and I do that by getting to know people and being curious in them, and I'm not going to settle for less than I think I could have. And when you're willing to lean into aloneness rather than trying to search and seek a partner and run from your aloneness, is when you actually start to learn to handle connecting with yourself as if you're your own soulmate. And it teaches you the love, and it teaches you how to handle nothing. And when you can learn to really enjoy and play and be creative and nothing, you start to be able to do that with more. You start to be able to do that with a partner. And then it becomes really enjoyable to have someone to play with, rather than I find a partnership and then I try and do all the work that I ran from when I had space and time to be alone, right? And that's, I think, for it seems like a lot of people tend to do it backwards, and it's okay whatever type of way we're doing it, but it's something to think about. You know, am I not looking at this person's darkness, and are or do they stand for things or have addictions to things that I really don't want for myself? And if I'm settling and compromising for that, I might need to rethink who I committed myself to, because your partner should not have greater addictions than you. Your partner should not be able to, should only your partner should not only want to hear about your emotions after having sex with you. Your partner should not feel like, oh, I need another girlfriend or boyfriend to be able to handle also. I should, like, the idea of, oh, I need multiple boyfriends and girlfriends just to keep me entertained enough to want to be with you, right? If we're relating to anyone like that, it's time to reconsider of I might have committed to I might be growing something with someone and committing to something that is really there's deeper truths here that I don't want to look at. And if I actually learned how to love and enjoy myself, I wouldn't be settling for this person. And recognizing, in career we sometimes do need to commit to things that suck that we won't don't want to do just so we can survive. But in relationships, we actually especially romantic relationships, I think with friends we can be a little bit more forgiving, right? With friends, they don't have to be perfect. And maybe that looks like I just don't see this person every now and then, but you recognize people who are in a lower level of consciousness, who are of addictions that you don't have. When you're friends with them, if you enjoy seeing them and you really enjoy your how connecting with them, seeing people like that actually can be really exciting. We just don't want to be in relationships like that, like romantic relationships like that with people, because we're essentially agreeing to take on their energy when we're having sex with people who are addicted to things we're not addicted to. And it's actually holding us back rather than helping us move forward. Right? It's almost like it's almost like we're having sex with the past, right? Rather than orienting towards the future. And so recognizing when you're in romantic partnership, lean into the aloneness and say, and really think, okay, what do I imagine myself being with the most amazing relationship that I could imagine? And most likely, the relationship you imagine, the person who actually eventually takes that spot is going to be better than your imagination. And if they're worse than your imagination, another thing to look at. but um, but recognizing that okay, if I imagine myself being different with my partner than how I am now, or I imagine myself being more healed, I imagine myself being more on top of my finances, I imagine myself being in a different career, I imagine myself being really on top of my physical fitness, or being a really good dancer, or being better at playing instruments, or keeping my apartment more clean. Can I do that now? And can I work to go? Can I grow? And, maybe if my romantic partner isn't in my life right now, maybe there's a reason why. And maybe it's because there's certain things I have to work out, certain things I have to heal, certain things or maybe it's I have to learn how to receive nothingness and to still find joy and play in that for me to actually fully and enjoy and play and have the most meaningful experience with the partner that's coming in my life. Or maybe it's like something around, maybe there's certain skills that I really want to embody but just haven't quite embodied, or there's a career that I'm trying to grow that hasn't quite taken off yet, and I'm going to have a more meaningful relationship with my romantic partner if when that career takes off than where I'm at right now. And so that partner is waiting for things to come into alignment in our life, right, on a universal level, right, in order for us to then have the most beautiful connection when we do finally meet. And so you truly don't know why your partner isn't here. You just know that every day is a day to grow. And when we're not taking time to grow, or not taking time to try and be our best selves, it's preventing us from being grown or being adult and mature and responsible, which is actually what you need to be able to handle more in your life. And when you have less, it's aligning yourself more with intentionality, love, and care of the divine feminine that then helps us care for ourselves, love ourselves, even when there's more in our life. And so there is a reason for space. And space isn't something to run from. Space is something to feel into and to welcome. And if we've been in space for a little bit, it then goes okay, if I desire better friendships, I might need to put myself out there more. I might need to ask new people to be my friend. I might need to go to different community events. If I desire there being a different career in my life, I might have to work at that. And I might have to continue to put content out there even when no one's paying attention, and maybe that's me becoming the flower that's still growing underneath the soil a little bit. and I see my beauty, and other people haven't recognized that yet, but that's not going to deter me because I know there's something really here, and I know this is what this feels meaningful for me to do, even when 2 people come to the show I play, or when 20 people watch my YouTube video. and and so recognizing whatever we're trying to create in our life, being slow and intentional, being curious of how we could be more creative, or being curious in the good and bad of the people we meet, and having compassion for however other people show up, but not putting expectations of, just because this person has a huge butt or a pretty face, this person's going to be my next partner. That's going to set you up for failure. Or, the other thing is, oh, this person has a lot of money and we get to go vacation in the Hamptons, and so I'm going to date this person without really taking the time to get to know them and see if they're actually someone I would want to commit to, and that's going to set you up for failure. And while it's nice to have money, it's not nice to have money while you're playing pretend with the wrong person. And what you realize is, whatever I'm trying to create, I have to be willing to stick with it even when people don't pay attention to it, because I believe in myself enough to know that there's something here, even if people haven't quite noticed it yet. And recognizing that people are going to tell you it's not that simple, right? Even like things of like, you're like trying to become a professional athlete. Not everyone's going to become a professional athlete, but that doesn't mean you couldn't at least play D2 or D1 college, and that might lead into someone becoming a coach of some kind, or a scout in the thing they're passionate about that's super fulfilling for them still. But you only would become a coach or a scout if you really understood the sport by continuing to work at it, and recognizing that the difference between people who are good and great is the people that are great are committed and consistent, and consistent without a doubt, more often than not every day. And I think I heard Tom Brady. I like sports a little, and I heard Tom Brady, someone was talking about that when Tom Brady was like 38 and it was a bye week in the NFL, he was still flying out as quarterback coach to like run on drills and work skills with him. And it's like, he was already a master of his craft, but he recognizes that the difference between someone that oftentimes is a Pro Bowler and the difference between someone who never makes the Pro Bowl is one person was more consistent and one person was more committed to their craft than others. And at a certain point, at a certain point, natural talent can't get you any further. And you have to go, if this is something I truly want to be great at and leave a legacy bigger than myself, right? I have to be married to my craft, and I have to work at it as if I have to work at it even when people aren't paying attention, and I have to work at it just like I would be devoted to my most amazing romantic partner. I have to work at it just as I'm like devoted to, maybe if we're spiritual, to God, or to being a better version of myself. Whatever I'm trying to create, whatever's my craft, I have to like marry my craft, and I have to work at it day in and day out, even if the improvements are so minimal most people wouldn't even notice them, because that's the difference between someone who's pretty good and someone that's great, is one person continued to work even when they got good, and continued to put in time and effort even when they weren't even sure if they were growing, because they understood that oftentimes when we start to get really good at something, the growth becomes really slow. But in order to actually be the best version of ourselves, we have to work at it just like we did when we had zero success. And oftentimes people that are wondering also why things that they're trying to create haven't been created in their life. Like, let's say we're like a musician, maybe we're like a drummer, and we've wanted more success in our drumming career than we found. Well, the question is, are you committing yourself to bands, right, that aren't really pushing your skill set? Like committing yourself to to people who are just starting out in music when you've been in music for 10 or 12 years? Right. And would you actually find that you grow more efficiently when you're more discerning about who you give a yes to and actually are working to be diligent of, I only want to commit myself to bands and music that's going to be pushing me to grow, especially when I have a little bit of a reputation of being a great drummer. And we all have to use discernment of, when is it okay for me to take more, play with more of a chill band? And when is it more okay for me to be discerning and say, no, I know I could play with a better band if I'm just willing to say no to the band in front of me, right? That's something that can be applied to any area of our life. Even dating, right? I know I could be with a better partner if I said no to the person who's in front of me trying to date me. And so, you know, in order to leave a real legacy, you have to be devoted to your craft, and you have to relate to your craft just as you would your soulmate, and you have to be in love with the craft so much that it becomes less about it becomes less about having other people recognize my skill and more about, I'm doing this because I want to be a master of it. I'm not doing this so much for external validation, because people giving you external validation will only get you so far, and there's always going to be people who love your stuff and hate your stuff. And you have to be willing to continue to grow even when not a lot of people are looking at it, or when you get a hate comment every now and then. And so I think that's a good place to wrap. And I thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. I love you guys so much. And I'll see you at the next video. Bye.